Ah, there you are. I have been waiting for you. Grab a chair and your favorite drink and sit back and enjoy. Here is an adventure on a far distant planet. Long ago, a megacorporation brought harvest robots to Ironspine, an uninhabited world rich with metals, crystals, geothermal vents, and rare elements. The AIs were designed for one purpose: harvest everything, extract everything, leave nothing behind. They dug, drilled, melted, and mined for centuries. But time passed. The corporation dissolved. The human operators stopped sending commands. The robot network kept going. Until the planet ran dry. No more ores, no more energy, no more fuel for the harvesters. Entire mining sectors went dark. And now the robots don't know what to do. Here is Chapter 1. Hope you enjoy. The sun hung low and bloated over Ironspine, bleeding orange light across the rust dunes. Heat rose in shimmering waves, bending the horizon. The distant mining rigs appeared like drowning giants, their old arms reaching for a sky that would never help them. Quill crouched in the shadow of a collapsed ore processor, his goggles pushed up into the mess of dark curls matted against his forehead. Sweat traced lines through the grime on his face, pooling in the hollow of his throat. His bronze skin shone in the light. It had pale welding scars and dark freckles from years under Ironspine's harsh sun. He was thin, wiry, his mother would have called it, back when she was alive, to call him anything. The kind of thin that came from running more than eating. It came from crawling through collapsed mine shafts and squeezing into places that larger scavengers couldn't reach. His patched leather jacket hung loosely on him. The sleeves were rolled to his elbows, showing forearms marked with old burns and fresh scratches. The processor's guts lay exposed before him like a mechanical autopsy. Corroded cables spilled from a cracked housing unit. Circuit boards, green with age and oxidation, jutted at odd angles. Most of it was worthless. 4 centuries of decay had seen to that. But Quill had learned to look deeper than most. "Come on," he muttered, prying at a sealed compartment with a flat-headed tool. "Give me something good. One power cell, one navigation chip, just one piece of—" The seal cracked. Dust puffed outward, coating his face, and he coughed, waving a hand through the cloud. Inside, nestled in thermal padding that had turned brittle and yellow with age, sat a trio of capacitor coils. Small, intact, the copper windings still held their shape. Quill grinned, a flash of white teeth against sun-darkened skin. "Hello, beautiful." He pocketed the coils carefully, wrapping each in scraps of cloth before tucking them into the satchel at his hip. 3 coils wouldn't make him rich, but they'd buy water rations for a week at Rustwater Bend. Maybe longer if he could convince old Hara at the trading post that they were military grade. They weren't, but Hara's eyes weren't what they used to be. He straightened, joints popping, and surveyed the debris field stretching before him. The locals called it the Rust Wells. It was a graveyard of old machinery. Aegis Extractive Systems had abandoned it 4.5 centuries ago. The company took everything from Ironspine. They drained its mineral veins and left without saying goodbye to the workers they had abandoned. Now their descendants scraped survival from the bones. The landscape was a study in decay. Massive conveyor systems lay toppled across the dunes like fallen bridges to nowhere. Processing towers leaned at risky angles. Their structural integrity was weakened by centuries of thermal cycling. Cables thick as Quill's torso snaked across the ground, half buried in rust-colored sand that shifted constantly in the dry wind. Nothing grew here. Nothing could. The soil was poisoned with heavy metals and chemical runoff from the extraction era. Even the hardiest desert scrub had given up generations ago. Quill whistled a bit of an old desert tune. His father used to hum it while fixing their caravan's engine. That was before the freebooter raid changed everything. The melody came out thin and nervous, barely more than breath pushed through pursed lips, a habit he denied having. He started walking. The sun tracked lower, painting the sky in bruised purples and angry reds. Ironspine's air, heavy with dust from old plants, made every sunset feel like a wound, beautiful in a way that reminded you that the planet was dying. Quill navigated the debris field skillfully. His boots found grip on the shaky ground. He shifted his weight to dodge sharp metal and hidden sinkholes. 22 years on this rust heap had taught him to read the ground like a language. That slight discoloration meant loose shale beneath. That pattern of shadows suggested a collapsed tunnel. That humming... He stopped. That humming was incorrect. It wasn't the tick-creak of cooling metal. It wasn't the whisper of sand against ancient alloy. It was lower and steadier, a subsonic vibration. He felt it more than heard it, thrumming through his boots and settling in his chest like a second heartbeat. Quill crouched instinctively, one hand dropping to the shock lance strapped to his thigh. Standard scavenger protocol. If it hums, it might be powered. If it's powered, it might be dangerous. On Ironspine, most things were dangerous. He scanned the immediate area, eyes narrowing against the dying light. The sound appeared to come from under a collapsed part of the conveyor scaffolding, about 30 meters ahead. The structure had fallen in a way that created a shadowed pocket underneath, a cave of twisted metal and accumulated debris. Smart scavengers would walk away. The rust wells held many dormant machines. When they woke, they were hungry. These systems sensed nearby life signs as materials to harvest. Just last month, a kid from Rustwater Bend had gotten too close to a drill serpent nest and come back missing an arm. Quill was not, by any reasonable definition, a smart scavenger. He approached in a wide arc, keeping low, placing each foot with deliberate care. The humming grew stronger as he neared, not louder exactly, but more present. It resonated in his teeth, in the small bones of his inner ear. The scaffolding shadow swallowed him as he ducked beneath a twisted I-beam. Darkness here was absolute, the kind that pressed against your eyes and made you doubt your own existence. He fumbled for the headlamp clipped to his jacket collar and thumbed it on. The cone of light showed a tight space filled with debris, rusted panels, and what seemed to be the remains of a maintenance drone stripped bare by scavengers. Beyond that, half buried in accumulated sand and mechanical detritus, something gleamed. Silver, smooth, curved. Quill's breath caught. He pushed forward, scrambling over obstacles, heedless of the metal edges that caught and tore at his jacket. The humming intensified with each meter, vibrating through his palms when he braced against the ground. It was a chassis, humanoid in shape, roughly his height, but clearly mechanical. The silver plating, dulled by years of dirt, still showed careful design. It had smooth curves instead of the bulky angles found in mining equipment. Translucent panels lined the arms and torso, dark now, but designed to glow. The head was a smooth, curved plate without obvious features, save for recessed optical sensors that caught his lamplight like sleeping eyes. The joints glowed faint amber beneath the dust, the color of a dying fire. The color of something not quite dead. Holy rust, Quill breathed. He'd found broken robots before. Everyone in Rustwater Bend had. This world was littered with them, the abandoned children of Aegis's automation age. But those were mining units and harvester components. They were industrial machines, lacking the grace of mobile construction equipment. This was different. This was elegant. This was intentional. The humming emanated from a point low in the chassis' torso, a core housing still faintly warm to the touch when Quill pressed his palm against it. Power signature, minimal but present. Someone or something had installed a backup system that had kept this machine in the barest state of preservation for who knew how long. Centuries, maybe, since before the collapse. Quill sat back on his heels, heart hammering. His mind raced through calculations. A find like this, intact, fixable, and clearly made before the collapse, would be worth more than all his earnings from scavenging. Hark Dune at Last Lantern would pay a fortune for the components alone. The optical sensors could power Rustwater's perimeter warnings for a decade. The plating could be melted down and reformed into weapons, into armor, into parts for the freebooter rigs that had killed his parents. He stopped. The thought landed like a stone in his stomach, cold and heavy. He looked at the chassis again, trying to see past the credit value, at the curves designed for grace rather than efficiency, at the translucent panels meant to display something, communicate something, at the joints that glowed amber like a heartbeat. This wasn't mining equipment. This was something else entirely. "What were you?" he asked softly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He talked to robots sometimes, another habit he denied having. They never answered, of course, but it made the loneliness of scavenging easier to bear. The humming continued, steady as a pulse. Quill made a decision. Getting the chassis back to Rustwater Bend took 4 hours. The sun had fully set by the time Quill finished rigging a makeshift sled from salvaged panels and frayed cable. Ironspine's night felt different from its day. It was cold, not hot. The temperature dropped quickly, and frost sometimes formed on exposed metal. The sky turned the color of old bruises, stars visible through gaps in the particulate haze like distant accusations. He dragged the sled through back routes, avoiding the main paths where other scavengers might see him. It wasn't that he didn't trust his neighbors, exactly. It was more that he didn't trust anyone with something this valuable. In a world where resources mean survival, sharing a find can split profits. If you're not careful, you might lose it all to someone quicker and less honest. Rustwater Bend materialized from the darkness like a tumor of light and sound. The town was built on an old filtration plant. Its buildings were a mix of pre-collapse ruins and makeshift structures. Anti-static poles stuck out from rooftops at odd spots, their tips crackled with faint blue sparks. This was the only thing stopping the harvesters from coming into town and turning people into raw materials. Maybe 200 people lived here, give or take. Humans, all descendants of corporate workers and scavengers. They were too poor, stubborn, or unlucky to leave when Aegis pulled out. They farmed rare fungi in the filtration tunnels, traded scavenged parts at irregular markets, and tried not to die. It wasn't much of a life, but it was the only one Quill knew. His workshop sat at the edge of town, a converted storage shed that listed slightly to one side and leaked when the rare acid rains came. He'd inherited it from his uncle after the man drank himself to death 3 years ago, one of the kinder ways to go on Ironspine. Quill hauled the sled through the door and kicked it shut behind him. Darkness enveloped him. He fumbled for the fungus lamp on his workbench and struck the igniter, coaxing a pale green glow from the bioluminescent culture. The light was weak, barely enough to see by, but it was free and didn't attract harvester attention the way electrical systems did. The chassis lay on the sled like a silver corpse, gleaming faintly in the organic light. Quill circled it slowly, examining it from multiple angles. The damage was less than he'd initially thought. Surface corrosion, a few dents, but nothing structural. Whatever material this thing was made of, it had been built to last. The core housing still hummed. He crouched next to it and felt along the seams. Soon he found what he needed, a small access panel by the chassis' hip, marked with unfamiliar symbols. pre-collapse tech used different iconography than the mining equipment he usually scavenged. More elegant, more obscure. "All right," he muttered, pulling his toolkit from beneath the workbench. "Let's see what you need." The next hour passed in a blur of spliced cables and improvised adapters. Quill learned basic robot reprogramming out of necessity. As a scavenger, you need to know how to bypass security systems and reroute power flows to survive. But this was different. The chassis' internal architecture was nothing like the crude industrial designs he was used to. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. He finally made a quick connection between the chassis' core housing and a good salvaged power cell. He had been saving it for emergencies. The cell wasn't strong enough for a full reboot, but if his calculations were right, it might be enough to. The hum changed. It deepened, strengthened, took on harmonic overtones that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The amber glow in the chassis' joints brightened, shifting from dying ember to steady warmth. The translucent panels along the arms flickered once, twice, then began to pulse with soft, rhythmic light. Quill scrambled backward, heart pounding. The curved headplate twitched, then lifted. Optical sensors lit up behind recessed lenses. They showed a shifting spectrum of colors, scanning everything all at once. They settled on Quill with an intensity that made him feel suddenly and profoundly seen. The chassis sat up. Movement flowed through its frame like water, smooth and precise despite centuries of dormancy. It turned its head slowly, taking in the cramped workshop, the scattered tools, the fungus lamp's pale glow. Its attention shifted back to Quill, and the optical sensors narrowed a bit. This could show curiosity, caution, or something else. The voice was smooth and clear. It had a feminine tone, but also harmonic undertones that showed its artificial origin. Scanning biological entity. Human male, age early 20s, physical condition, minor dehydration, elevated heart rate indicates stress response. A pause. The headplate tilted at an angle that was just slightly wrong, more than human flexibility would allow. "What is your designation?" Quill's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Quill," he managed. "My name is Quill." The chassis processed this for a moment. Quill, insufficient data for surname correlation, proceeding with primary designation. Another pause, longer this time. The optical sensors flickered through several color cycles before settling on a warm amber that matched the glow of the joints. Accessing memory. Significant data corruption detected. Attempting reconstruction. The translucent panels pulsed erratically. The chassis' hands, slender and flexible, twitched as if reaching for something unseen. Unable to complete full memory reconstruction. Core personality matrices intact. Primary directive intact. The voice changed slightly, losing some of its mechanical flatness. "I am Syndra 7X, Resource Analysis Unit, Project Sentry. My function is—" Another pause. "My function is—" The optical sensors fixed on Quill again. This time something shifted behind them, something that looked almost like recognition. "How did you locate this unit?" "I found you," said Quill slowly, still pressed against the far wall of his workshop.